Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Dennis. Now let me ask you something. How sure are you right now that everything around you is, well, real? We all walk around thinking time is this straight line, marching forward like a particularly determined soldier. But what if it's more like a wobbly, tangled up bowl of spaghetti? What if sometimes you could just trip and fall right out of your own timeline and into another one? It's a thought that's either completely terrifying, or, if you're like me, kind of exciting. The idea that the solid ground of reality we stand on might just be a thin sheet of ice over a very, very weird ocean of possibilities. Today, we're diving headfirst into that weird ocean. We're counting down some of the most baffling, mind-bending, and honestly, just plain strange cases of alleged time slips ever reported. These are stories from ordinary people who claim they momentarily stepped out of their own time and into the past, or even the future. From tourists who got a little more than they bargained for on their vacation, to pilots seeing things that shouldn't exist yet, these accounts challenge everything we think we know about the universe. So, grab your tinfoil hats, suspend your disbelief, or don't, I'm not your boss, and get ready. We're about to explore those moments when the clock of the universe seems to skip a beat. Are these genuine glimpses into other eras, or just elaborate tricks of the mind? Frankly, I have no idea. But we're going to look at the evidence, or lack thereof, and see if we can make any sense of it. This is Time Slips, Unraveling the Unexplained. Our first case, coming in hot, is probably the OG of time slips, the one that got everybody talking. It's known as the Moberly-Jourdain incident, or the Versailles time slip, which just sounds classier. Back in August of 1901, two very respectable, very British academics, Charlotte Ann Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain, were on holiday in France. They decided to visit the Palace of Versailles, as one does. They were trying to find a little spot called the Petit Trianon, a small chateau on the grounds. And this is where their pleasant little tourist jaunt took a sharp left turn into the twilight zone. As they walked, they said the whole atmosphere changed. It became oppressive, heavy, like the air itself was old. They encountered people in what they described as old-fashioned 18th century clothing. They saw a woman shaking a cloth out of a window, groundskeepers who looked like they'd just stepped out of a history book, and a man with a pockmarked face who gave them a deeply unsettling vibe. They felt a sense of dread and unreality, and even the landscape seemed to change around them, looking more like old maps of the grounds than the current layout. It was all very weird, but they eventually found their way back to their hotel and didn't think too much of it. It wasn't until they started comparing notes later that they realized something was deeply, deeply wrong. They both recalled details that didn't match 1901 Versailles. After a ton of research, and I mean these were academics after all, they concluded they hadn't just gotten lost. They believed they had somehow, for a brief period, slipped back in time and seen the grounds of Versailles as they were in the 1790s, possibly even witnessing Marie Antoinette herself sitting and sketching. Now, skeptics have a field day with this one, suggesting shared delusion or misremembering, but two highly educated women meticulously documenting such a bizarre event, it remains one of the most compelling, and frankly spookiest, time slip cases on the books. Next up, we have a story that feels like the beginning of a horror movie. In 1979, two British couples, the Simpsons and the Gisbys, were driving through France on their way to a vacation in Spain. They got a bit lost, as you do before the glorious invention of GPS, and ended up on a strange cobblestone road. It was getting late, they were tired, and they were desperate for a place to stay. Out of the gloom, they spotted an old-fashioned building with a sign that read simply, Hotel. It looked ancient, with circus posters from the early 1900s plastered on the walls. They went inside and the weirdness just ramped up. The innkeeper was there, but there was no phone, no elevator, just rickety wooden stairs. The rooms were bizarrely primitive for 1979, no locks on the doors, just simple wooden latches, and the beds had heavy coarse sheets. They even saw two men in what looked like 19th century military uniforms walk past them. The whole thing was deeply strange, but they were exhausted, so they paid a ridiculously small amount for the room, only 19 francs, and went to bed, chalking it up to a quirky, rustic, French experience. The next morning they had a simple breakfast, paid their bill, and left, feeling a bit weirded out, but rested. A few years later, on another trip, they decided to try and find that strange, cheap hotel again. But they couldn't. They drove up and down the same roads, but it was gone. The cobblestone street, the old building, all of it. It was as if it had never been there. They checked maps, asked locals, nothing. Photographic evidence from their trip even showed a blurry spot where the hotel should have been. Did they stumble into a pocket of the past for one night, or did they just find a really well-hidden budget motel that went out of business? The world may never know. Our third stop takes us to my side of the pond, in Liverpool, England, specifically to a place called Bold Street. Now Bold Street is a busy modern shopping street, but for decades it's also been the epicenter for a baffling number of time-slip reports. People will be walking down the street minding their own business, maybe looking for a new pair of shoes, when suddenly, things change. The modern storefronts flicker and are replaced by shops from the 1950s or 60s. The cars turn into vintage models. Even the people are dressed in fashions from a bygone era. One of the most famous accounts comes from a man named Frank, an off-duty police officer. In 1996, he was walking down Bold Street when he suddenly felt like he'd stepped into a pocket of silence. He looked around and saw a small van that looked like it was from the 1950s trying to dodge him, the driver shouting something he couldn't hear. He looked at the shops and saw the names had changed. A modern bookstore was now Cripps, and a women's clothing store was Cardin's. He saw people in 1950s attire walking past him. Panicked, he ran across the street, and just as suddenly as it began, he was back in 1996. This isn't an isolated incident. There are dozens of similar stories connected to Bold Street. A woman who went into a shop to buy a book, only to have the shopkeeper look at her money like it was from Mars, and when she walked out, the shop was gone, replaced by a modern bank. Another person saw the street as it was in the Victorian era, complete with horse-drawn carriages. Physicists have speculated about magnetic fields or temporal distortions, while skeptics point to memory playing tricks. But with so many people reporting the same phenomenon in the same place, you have to wonder if Bold Street is less of a shopping district and more of a temporal train station. Most time slips seem to involve a trip to the past, which makes sense. The past has already happened, it's a fixed destination theoretically. But what about slipping forward? This next case is one of the rare and truly unsettling accounts of a glimpse into the future. It comes from Sir Victor Goddard, a respected senior officer in the Royal Air Force. Not exactly the kind of guy you'd expect to be making up ghost stories. In 1935, Goddard was flying his biplane over an abandoned airfield at Drem, Scotland. The airfield was derelict, overgrown with weeds, and the hangars were falling apart. On his flight back, he flew into a bizarre, freak storm. The clouds were a strange yellow-brown color and his plane was tossed around violently. He lost control and started spiraling towards the ground. Fearing the worst, he suddenly emerged from the storm clouds into brilliant, uncanny sunshine. He looked down and saw he was back over the Drem airfield, but it wasn't the same airfield he'd seen just minutes before. It was completely renovated and operational. The hangars were pristine, and the runways were paved and clean. He saw mechanics on the ground, dressed in blue overalls, which was strange because RAF mechanics at the time wore brown. He also saw 4 yellow planes parked on the runway. He'd never seen planes of that color or model before. Confused, he flew on, re-entered the storm, and after another rough ride, landed safely back at his home base. He told his fellow pilots about the strange vision, but no one could explain it. Here's the kicker. 4 years later, in 1939, the RAF began painting their training planes yellow, and their mechanic uniforms were switched from brown to blue. The Drem airfield was fully reactivated, becoming a busy training base, just as Goddard had seen it. Did a weird storm literally blow him into the future for a few minutes? Okay, I know what you're thinking. Dennis, you already talked about Versailles, and you're right, but this is important. The Moberly-Jourdain incident is so famous, it often overshadows the fact that it's the quintessential time slip case. It's the one all other cases are compared to. So let's just take a second to really dig into why this one is so stubbornly persistent. It wasn't just a fleeting feeling or a weird sight, it was a prolonged shared experience documented with academic rigor. Moberly was the principal of St. Hugh's College, Oxford, and Jourdain was her vice principal. These were not flighty individuals. They didn't just see a ghost in a funny hat. They described a complete sensory shift. The very quality of the light changed, the sounds were muted, they felt an overwhelming sense of melancholy and oppression, a feeling they later dubbed the gloom. They interacted, however briefly, with the figures they saw. They described a running man, 2 officials in green uniforms, and most famously, a woman sketching on the grass who they later became convinced was Marie Antoinette herself, just a few years before the French Revolution kicked into high gear, and everything went sideways for her. After the event, they spent nearly a decade researching. They compared their independent accounts, which matched in uncanny detail, and then cross-referenced those details with historical records of Versailles from the late 18th century. They found that details they noted, like a specific small bridge or a particular kiosk, had existed in the 1780s but were long gone by 1901. Skeptics propose everything from a simple misunderstanding to them stumbling upon a private, costumed party, but a party that could perfectly replicate the historical layout of the gardens and instill a feeling of oppressive sadness. That seems like a stretch. For believers, this is ground zero. proof that the past isn't gone, it's just next door. So, there you have it. 5 stories that make you question whether your watch is telling you the right year. From academic ladies on a weirdly historical holiday to pilots getting a sneak peek at future fashion trends, the idea of time slips is as fascinating as it is unprovable. Are these all just cases of misidentification, overactive imaginations, or maybe even a shared folie à deux? Or is our understanding of linear time fundamentally flawed? Maybe reality is a lot more fragile than we give it credit for, and every now and then people just fall through the cracks. Personally, I'm not sure what to believe, but it's a whole lot more fun to think the universe has a few glitches in its software. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think is going on here? Are these legitimate temporal phenomena, or is there a more down-to-earth explanation for all of them? And more importantly, have you ever experienced anything like this? A moment where things just felt out of time? Let me know your theories and your own spooky stories down in the comments. I read as many as I can, and honestly, your stories are often weirder than the ones I find, which I love. Thanks for sticking around and diving into the unexplained with me. If you enjoyed getting your brain twisted into a pretzel, be sure to like and subscribe, because we're just getting started. Next time, we're heading into the deep woods to look at some of the most bizarre and unsettling cases of mysterious disappearances in national parks. You won't want to miss it. Until then, stay curious, and maybe keep an eye on the clock.